Ствол опусти! Лукаш автомата, блядь! Лукаш автомата прибрав, нахуй! Провоси автомат, руки вгору!
Краще цю позицію зараз не палить, а притримать, коли буде пизда. Сука, пидоры.
A special operations unit from Ukraine, known as the 3rd SSO Regiment, conducted a forest sweep that eventually led to direct contact with Russian forces. The operation did not begin with gunfire. Instead, the first thing that was evident was the discipline of movement. The squad commander locks down the location to be captured. The first firefight is opened to ensure safe movement. Ukrainian Special Forces found a location close to the enemy position. This is a crucial phase in small operations, securing the location before taking action. At this point, the operation entered a different phase than before. Once the enemy's position became clear, the unit began to approach cautiously. The distance was close enough for direct engagement, but they maintained natural cover and safe firing angles. Instead of immediately launching an attack, instructions were issued to the enemy to surrender. This is a common procedure in close quarters operations, especially when the enemy's position is locked and the chances of resistance are considered limited. The goal was clear: to end the situation without further fighting. The negotiations were underway. Ukrainian Special Forces gave Russian troops leeway. Then this happened. The area was secure, but in a nearby shelter, there was a surviving Russian soldier, and they secured him to determine his next hiding place. Recent reports from military sources and battlefield observations indicate that the situation on the front lines around Kupiansk is showing significant changes. Ukrainian forces have reportedly increased operational pressure on Russian units in several active sectors. This pressure is not occurring in a single, decisive offensive, but rather through a series of phased operations, advanced movements, the capture of tactical positions, and sustained pushes into previously contested areas. As this pressure increases, there are indications that some Russian units are beginning to withdraw from certain positions. In some cases, reports indicate that troops are being relocated or withdrawn to other defensive lines, after claims of previous advances were deemed to not fully reflect the actual situation on the ground. These changes indicate that territorial control in the sector is unstable. Positions that were previously tightly held are now changing hands again. This is a sign that Ukrainian counter-operations in the area are capable of forcing shifts in the front lines, albeit on a localized and gradual scale.
О. Давай, блядь, нахуй. Рухайтесь, сука.
In an operational context, this situation reflects the nature of modern positional warfare, where territorial control is not always changed through a single major battle, but through sustained pressure that slowly erodes the opponent's ability to hold a particular position. In other words, what was happening around Kupiansk was not just a simple tactical maneuver. It was a dynamic struggle for battle space, advancing, defending, retreating, and then retaking it as both sides sought to maintain or improv their positions on the front lines. Shortly after preparations were complete, the unit moved into action. Several days prior, the reconnaissance unit had been covertly monitoring the enemy's position. They noted activity patterns when the guard changed, where supplies came from, and which sectors were least monitored.
Що тут, підери туди, да?
Да, на 250-300 метрів. Але контакту в нас з ними немає. Там 50 з ним воюють.
The unit assembled at a safe point, far from the active front line. The approach route was determined, and areas of responsibility were assigned. There was no loud noise. Communication was brief, to the point. They already knew their target, a defensive position the enemy had been monitoring for the past few days. The objective was clear: not to attack openly, but to approach, press, and then take control. Each unit member maintained their distance. There was no hasty movement. They stopped periodically, listening, observing, ensuring their direction remained correct. Several hours passed, only to close a few hundred meters. At a certain point, everyone knew the enemy position was close. The tempo changed, the pace shortened, all attention was focused forward.
Каже, ви в ту кухоньку перебіг би.
Да, може прибіжити.
Що ти? Давай.
Готовий?
Да.
Давай, пішов.
In the distance, we heard several measured explosions. They weren't major attacks, more like targeted disturbances. The goal wasn't to destroy, but to keep the enemy's position under pressure. The unit we were following remained in cover. They waited for the right moment. As the pressure built, small movements began again. Meter by meter, the distance was reduced. Now they were close enough to see the defensive line. When the distance became too close, the covert movements turned into direct confrontation. Units quickly took up natural cover around the defensive line. There was no large, simultaneous attack. The pressure came in stages. One sector was secured, then the next. Short movements, rapid communication, full focus on maintaining control of the space. A few moments later, the situation changed. Resistance began to weaken. The enemy's escape routes narrowed. The previously stable defensive line was now unsteady. Once the last of the pressure eased, the unit didn't immediately relax. They moved quickly, sweeping the entire area. Every cover was checked. Every corner was secured. Old positions were immediately converted into new defensive lines. Observers were posted. The direction of a possible counterattack was monitored. Only after the perimeter is stabilized is the operation considered complete. Control has changed. From start to finish, the operation unfolded not as one grand battle, but as a gradual process. Approaching unobserved, pressing unhurriedly, attacking with control, capturing with discipline. This is how many positions on the front line changed hands slowly, systematically, and determined by the readiness of units capable of maintaining pressure until the enemy could no longer hold out.
Сука, підери.
This
time, the atmosphere was much more intense. The terrain changed, distances became closer, and the seizure of territory was carried out through highly precise CQB, close quarters battle, operations by Ukrainian forces against positions defended by Russian units.
Тут взагалі небезпечно, ми ж в Донецькій області.
While in the previous sector, the fighting took place in open spaces and with long defensive lines. In this sector, the space for maneuver was extremely limited. Damaged buildings, cramped structures, and poor visibility created conditions where contact could occur within mere meters. Units no longer moved spread out. They moved tightly, structured, and highly coordinated.
Вельчеві люди, нахуй, всі піздець. Заєбісь. Але в мене інше.
Every corner, every door, every enclosed space, a potential point of direct contact. This is where the operation transformed into close quarters precision combat. As space after space was secured, the enemy's usable area became increasingly narrow. There was no massive, all-out push, just consistent, forward pressure. Corridors were controlled. Stairways were secured. Key shelters were isolated. At some point, the defended position no longer had any defensive depth. Space for maneuver was exhausted.
І вам знести БК і все, да? Що? Чи ні? Січ! Ждем!
This is where the real conquest of territory occurs, not with a single, massive attack, but with the systematic reduction of defensive space. Once the final point is secured, units immediately switch from offense to defense. Entrances are monitored. Approaches are monitored. Structures that previously served as enemy defenses now become new protections. Only when the entire space is under control is territory truly captured. This was the most crucial moment, when the final battle for space unfolded at extremely close range, and the outcome of the operation was decided in a matter of seconds. This reconstruction follows a Ukrainian unit as it pressed on to the last remaining Russian position inside the structure. The unit has captured almost the entire building. The corridor is secure. The previous rooms have been searched. But one point remains the final room, the enemy's central refuge. All movement stops a few meters from the entrance. No loud noises, no lengthy communications, just hand signals. Positions are taken, viewpoints are shared. Everyone knows after this door, there is no retreat. The team moves in a rehearsed sequence. Everyone immediately locks in on their respective viewpoints. Short movements, sharp focus. No empty space is left unattended. In a confined space, it's not the number of personnel that matters. It's who controls the viewpoint first. And in a matter of seconds, the balance of space shifts.
Плюс-плюс, тримайтесь біля тих, хто є з другої роти біля вас, і все буде ок. Пам'ятайте, в нас пароль помінявся.
There were no more free lanes of movement. There were no safe corners left. Control of the space now rested entirely with the newly entered team.